Welcome, everyone. This is Webinar Wednesday, and I'm Dr. Pebbles Turbyville, the CEO of Horses and Humans Research Foundation. And we are going to have a great guest tonight with our equine well-being series. And I have Molly Sweeney to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Pebbles. Pebbles and I had the wonderful opportunity to hear and meet and visit with Dr. McLean when we were at the Equitation Science Conference in New Zealand. So we know how good he is, and I know you will think he's absolutely fabulous. He is a well-known equine behaviorist and trainer, recognized for his work in improving horse training efficiency and welfare. Also, he works with elephants, hence my background tonight with elephants. He is particularly noted for his contribution to the understanding of equine behavior through scientific research and practical application, for which he has won Australia's highest science award, the Eureka Prize for Science. Dr. McLean's work is centered on enhancing the quality of life for horses by fostering a deeper understanding of their behavior cognition and applying training principles that prioritize their well-being. Tonight, Dr. McLean will be examining the current landscape of equestrianism and how we can leverage equitation science to foster a sustainable future by enhancing both horse welfare and performance. Dr. McLean.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. So, thank you very much. I have been really looking forward to this webinar because it's an area that's really dear to my heart, and of course it is an extremely topical topic at the moment to look at the future of horse sports and where we are going. How I wanted to start though is to first of all look at where we've been, because I think we can't really appreciate where we're going until we can have some appreciation of where we've been. So whoops, next button, right. So I want to talk about how we actually value animals. And I think it's worthwhile to take a look at how we humans, as a supposedly rationally autonomous species, value horses and other animals. There's quite a lot of interesting literature about our moral concern for animals. The list of how we value them includes our perceptions of an animal's intelligence, its sentience, its harmfulness, hence the picture of me as a scrawny teenager with a snake, and aesthetic judgments, for example, how cute the animal is. We also value animals according to their utility, and in that I'm including elements like their edibility, the protection they afford us, and the pleasure they give us. For me, that's why I've got this quite strange picture here. Snakes and birds were the first animals to really spark my curiosity in zoology, and they're typically relegated to lower than pest level owing to their perceived harmfulness. So animals are not intrinsically valued, but actually more valued by our perception of them. I also now want to move on to the origin of contemporary narratives in horse-human interactions. The terms that we've used throughout history relate to how we've used the horse over the centuries. For example, the term loyalty. Horses became iconic very early on because of their utility in war. They were said to be loyal, and alongside us, they were fighting the good fight. Then, with the use of horses in trade and agriculture, horses were said to have a tireless work ethic. Of course, those that didn't have that ethic were termed lazy or weak. With the advent of horse sports, horses apparently shared the human will to win. And more recently, with the widespread use of the horse in leisure as well as sport, partnership and cooperation became part of the equestrian language. All of these terms that we used to describe horses became embedded in the collective psyche of equestrian people. They shape the horse in our minds as almost human. Thus, it isn't surprising that throughout history, animals have been perceived as having a human-like stream of consciousness and a moral framework because they were seen as culpable. They could be blamed for their various misdemeanors. In earlier times, the treatment of animals in many parts of Europe was directed by the church and the courts. There are some fascinating stories from the literature of the Middle Ages relating to the treatment of animals. For example, in 1457, a cow was hanged in Savigny in France for the murder of a 5-year-old boy named John Martin. Her 6 piglets were found guilty of being accessories after the fact, but they were pardoned because of their extreme youth, since they were not considered old enough to know the enormity of their crime. And another little story I found interesting, in 1559, a Lutheran pastor in Dresden appealed for help in punishing sparrows for their incessant and extremely vexatious chattering and scandalous acts of unchastity committed during the sermon. Nevertheless, it's interesting to know that up to the 20th century, there were many rules, bylaws, and government acts in Western and Eastern Europe that were put in place to actually protect animals from unnecessary suffering. Many people question the notion of partnership and the horse and rider as a team. As Malgorzata Lubelska-Sasnow has recently pointed out, the ethics are questionable because if we consider it a case of discrimination, that only one of the team members, namely the animal one, can be struck with a whip up to 3 times in a row according to the FEI jumping rules 2023, or 6 to 7 times during a race in most racing countries, yet the other team member of the partnership doesn't get struck at all. As I will explain later, these are some of the elements that the general public call into question about our social license with horses. Next slide. There we go. I also want to talk a little bit about the background of what we know as ethology, which is the study of animal behavior, and psychology, because there was a sort of Cold War going on in the origin of these two academic areas last century. Ethology basically arose in Europe and was about the study of natural and innate behaviors in animals. People, famous people like Konrad Lorenz and Tinbergen and Leyhausen were European scientists, and what they talked about largely was the hardware of animals, what we call their telos, their natural genetic potentials for behaviors. And so we learned in ethology about things like imprinting, hence the picture of Konrad Lorenz with his imprinted geese. But basically ethology is a template for behavior. Psychology, on the other hand, arose on the other side of the Atlantic, and psychology was all about modifying behavior through experience. And those people that were famous in the early days, particularly Thorndike, Watson and Skinner, what they talked about, and they did some very impressive experiments that I think many of us would do well to understand more thoroughly today. Skinner himself wrote over 400 papers. But what they showed was that basically the hardware that an animal is born with can be modified or superimposed upon, I should say, through learning. And yet these two really didn't talk to each other over the years. I remember as a student in zoology, because it was in the science department, our lecturer never had any respect for psychology and would talk about those people with those animals. They put them in little mazes and they think they know how the animal works. Whereas we zoologists, we put ourselves in a hide and we watch animals in nature. The fact is, both of them are right, and both of them work together, and they do now in this new area called cognitive ethology. But because of problems with behaviorism, and particularly with the social conservatives in the USA, behaviorism took a really big demise. But it also was a lot to do with people's loss of trust in science. Science really lost its appeal in the 1960s. And I can remember in those days, my mother could even go to a shop in Melbourne and have an X-ray of her foot in order to get the best fit for shoes. And of course, that would be seen as really quite a not a good idea these days. But that was the early trust in everything scientific. But then, of course, we had all these issues with nuclear mass destruction potentials from the military. In medicine, we had medical mishaps such as the thalidomide tragedy and a few others. And in the environment, Rachel Carson wrote her book, Silent Spring, which was all about the effects of DDT. And of course, pollution and overpopulation began to zoom into our consciousness. And to make matters worse, Watson and Skinner, the famous behaviorists, had very ambitious claims about behaviorism. And so their famous mantra was, you can turn a peasant into a lawyer through understanding learning theory. And while this might be true, it really caused the end of behaviorism, because the social conservatives didn't really like the idea that anybody could become anybody and that people in high positions might lose their power. And at the same time, up came the research of Bowlby and Harlow with rhesus monkeys and the studies of attachment theory. And so in came the cognitive revolution, which really replaced behaviorism. In a way, I think it was a shame that we lost behaviorism altogether, because the veracity of learning theory is something that really helps us understand animals, and particularly with horses. We need to know how to reinforce their behaviors. We need to know what we do when it is actually perceived by the horse as punishing. And basically punishment and reinforcement are opposing, in the sense that punishment is all about the removal or the reduction of behaviors, whereas reinforcement is about the engendering new behaviors. The human and horse hierarchy was also something that came out of that era because of the downplay of behaviorism and the upswing of cognitive therapy, and also the work of Harry Harlow. But because of that, the New Age horse trainers really jumped onto it, and they really recognised the pop science appeal of the hierarchy. So the mindset that the horse is dominant and needs to be made submissive and to respect the handler or rider, it's not only wrong, but it's also dangerous and poor welfare, because it easily leads to retribution, such as hitting, punishing, blaming, paying back, being boss, putting horses in their place. Dominance in horses and other animals is typically for resources, and each horse learns its relationship with other horses in the social group for each resource. In addition, when horses have had enough of a particular resource, their dominance for that resource diminishes. So you can see that dominance is far too simplistic. And besides that, we don't know how or why horses would, via dominance, relate to humans in the absence of any useful resource for the horse. On top of this, the idea of dominance conveniently allows us to be less concerned about how the horse feels, as well as its flight response and fear. But anyway, the pop science appeal of the hierarchy came naturally to humans, owing to the existence in our organisations of such things as the military, the state, the hierarchies in business, in the church, and even in schools. So in the 1960s and 70s came the rise of the New Age trainers who sought explanation of horse behaviour from, or supposedly from, science, and they became increasingly monetised. Buoyed by early studies in horses, wolves, and other species, New Age trainers embraced the pecking order to produce a social dominance model of training based on notions of dominance, submission, respect, and later leadership. The spotlight was once again very clearly and supposedly scientifically on the horse's character, but not on the trainer's use of learning processes. So we saw New Age character descriptors such as alpha mare. We talked about horses that had behaviour problems as simply relating to their dominance. We heard about submission, or submissive horses, and these were even in dressage tests until recently. And people talk about horses being respectful or disrespectful. But the point is that ritualized aggression could, according to this model, be justified to solve behavior problems. And then we saw in more recent years the 5 freedoms model of animal welfare. It was indeed the first really major step forward at the time in the protection of animals and in the improvement of welfare standards. The 5 domains were very much about protecting animals from the bad things in life, freedom from hunger, disease, pain, etc. However, in one sense, animals were still regarded as object rather than subject, and much of that, again, is the result of their usefulness to humans. And so along came the 5 domains model from the lab of Professor David Mellor. It is more than just protecting the horse from the bad things in life. It is about enabling the horse to have a life worth living. So we see these domains. We've got nutrition and hydration, the physical environment, health and fitness, and behavioural interactions, with their subgroups as well in behavioural interactions. We can see their behavioural interactions with the environment, with other animals, and with humans. But the most important aspect is the way they all feed in to the mental state. And this includes, of course, how we ride horses and what we do with them, that whether they're comfortable or not, that leads into their mental states and whether they have the development of positive effect or negative effect. So that's the critical part, this mental state. Affective states are all about the horse's feelings of hopelessness or positivity as a result of current past experiences. In that way, affective states are more than simply just emotional states because they imply mood, which is an animal's experience over a longer term. There are a number of experimental tests that can be done that reveal an animal's affective states, such as judgment bias tests. Horses living in more natural social groups show indications of good welfare and an optimistic bias according to such tests, and pessimistic bias strongly correlates with poor welfare. In the 5 domains model, the domains are not weighted. The model doesn't express one domain or need as more important than another because these are all relative to the animal's particular experience. Commonly, however, we relegate certain things as essential needs to the horse, and we call this the 3 Fs: foraging, friends, and freedom. I think there is a 4th F there too, which I call fortitude, and that relates to how horses are trained. If they are confused, in pain, or their needs are not met, their mental state deteriorates. Horses need to feel secure, and I call that fortitude. The 5 domains model has been adopted by so many organisations and across the world, such as the FEI, through the Equine Ethics and Wellbeing Commission, the World Association of Zoos and Aquaria, the International Federation of Horse Racing, Pony Club Australia, and Racing Victoria, amongst many others. Incidentally, it's had, up until I think 2 months ago, over 100,000 downloads, which is a really incredible achievement. Sentient beings. The 5 domains model recognises the importance of the horse's fundamental needs, and it recognises animals, including horses, as sentient beings. Sentience includes subjective experiences, feelings, emotional prolongation, and impact suffering, the impacts that horses suffer, or other animals too, of course. And sentience is influenced by arousal, affective states, and attachment. I also want to talk about ISIS now that we're almost 20 years old with this upcoming conference, and of course a little bit older when we include the symposia that occurred earlier. The ISIS first principles are often called the 10 training principles. The development of these principles has been a long work in progress with many iterations and amendments. They are based in what is currently known about cognition and learning processes in horses. These can be found on the website for the International Society for Equitation Science. And while I'm on that topic, I should also point out that what the aims and mission of ICE is really predicated by its multidisciplinary aspect. It's a very important thing that we include many different areas of study, from psychology all the way through to physics, and more recently it's even embraced some of the social sciences. It's always envisaged that this multidisciplinary aspect is important in order to know as much as possible about horses. However, equitation science is based on what we can define and measure as scientists. It is not a method. It is really a series of hoops through which every horse training method should be able to jump if they are considered ethical. And some already have done that. I note that in the Pirelli system, for example, they were the first to attempt to look at their system and compare it with the ISIS principles, and I was very fortunate to be part of that team to assess that, and that in many respects they did very well. Importantly, equitation science doesn't claim to be all that there is in horse training or horse-human interactions. There are many things we cannot define and many things we can't measure, and in fact there's far more that we don't know than we actually do. These training principles, as I mentioned, they're available on the website, but these cover so many aspects of the 5 domains, but as well as the important use of training, of recognizing as trainers where our training fits in regard to operant conditioning, classical conditioning, and how we might build training using shaping. The 10th one, the regard for self-carriage, is something I want to talk to a little bit later. Social license to operate. I think Lebelska-Sazonow's 2024 definition of social license is the best one I've seen. She describes it as an unwritten, non-legally binding contract by which society gives the sport the right to operate ethically. I say gives in inverted commas. And so social license to operate, it's actually a very new term, and it began over the outcry of environmentalists over mining and forestry. I think mining was the first one. But right now, modern horse sports face increasing public scrutiny. Several high-profile incidents, including abusive training practices that include ischemic blue tongues by high-level professionals, pressure equestrian organisations to investigate and reform current training practices. Subsequently, the social licence to operate for equestrian sports is in crisis. Governments are beginning to take notice. According to the World Organization for Animal Health, the OIE, an animal is in a good state of welfare when it is healthy, comfortable, well-nourished, safe, able to express innate behaviours, and without suffering from unpleasant states such as pain, fear, or distress. Some EU member states, such as Spain and the Netherlands, are very progressive in broadening the scope of animal rights through granting more rights to certain kinds of animals, pets in the case of Spain, and farm animals in the case of the Netherlands. For example, the recently amended Article 2.1 of the Dutch Animal Protection Act sets out that animals will no longer be adapted to the system, but the system will be adapted to the needs of animals. According to the new Dutch legislation, people are no longer allowed to harm an animal by housing it against their natural social way of living. According to Spanish law, pets are no longer considered as objects, but as sentient beings that may be considered part of a human family. The UK Animal Welfare Act of 2006 suggests additionally that horses should have a suitable environment and have appropriate company. But this isn't always the case in other countries. Social license to operate essentially sees the end of behind closed doors behaviours, because everybody has an opinion, a camera, and one or more social media platforms. Social license is soaring through the horse industry as we speak. There is a pervasive belief in the horse industry that the solution is to convince and educate the public about the sanctity and worthiness of human equine partnerships, and then social license to operate will be restored. To some extent that might be true. However, social license is more about the duty of care we owe to animals and the trust we owe to the public that the use of animals is of the highest ethical standards perceived by the public. According to recent studies by Ingalls in 2021 and Taylor in 2022, the general public's tolerance for poor welfare in sport horse is rapidly evaporating. And the reason I've got this elephant, that's a picture of an elephant brochure from Chiang Mai, is because the elephant can be seen as the canary in the coal mine. In just 10 years, elephant riding disappeared altogether in northern Thailand, not complete, but almost altogether in northern Thailand as a result of a BBC documentary and the consequent boycotting of tourism in Thailand. Now people go to Thailand to have an experience with elephants, and the latest wave and most up-to-date ecotourism with elephants is to go to an elephant sanctuary and watch elephants behave in their natural setting. Already we see advertisements around the world to ban horse riding, and that's why I think, and also elephants have been banned for use in circuses. In India, elephants are not allowed to be used anymore for public entertainment. I think we need to see the writing on the wall in the horse world, because it is not up to us as scientists or as horse riders. It is really up to the public how they see what we do, and we need to be transparent. I want to talk a little bit about the Equine Ethics and Wellbeing Commission that the FEI put into place in 2020. 22, that should be. The EEWC was set up by the International Equestrian Federation as a response to growing concerns about the welfare of horses in sport and its diminishing social license. According to the EEWC, the horse's natural living conditions are to be outside in nature with the herd. However, a modern sport horse's living conditions might be the least stressful thing for them. The most troubling aspect might well be the way in which these horses are trained and used by a substantial number of riders. Also, the way in which young equestrians are taught by their trainers and the way in which young riders train their horses constitute equestrian reality. Wrapping, soaring in some countries, roll curve, that's hyperflexion, the abuse of horses with spurs, whips, and even electric shocks. So it's really important that we put the spotlight on ourselves, or as we say, turn the mirror onto ourselves. According to the EEWC survey, 75% of respondents had concerns about the welfare of horses in sport. However, the highest percentages of concerns were in two groups outside elite sports, such as vets, that was 87%, and leisure riders, 84%. So actually the highest percentages came from stakeholders not actually deriving direct profits. It's interesting to note that in Germany, the total turnover of the horse industry is estimated at 6.7 billion euros. To be part of horse sports initially, there are high costs, and in that way it's considered, and of course the increasing costs of buying elite level horses mean that it's very much a sport for middle and upper social classes. And also we need to take account of the fact that the transport of horses across the world has a high carbon footprint. So let's look at change. When we just having a look at the time there, I think I'm going okay. When we look at a change in the and the way we can understand the 5 domains, the 10 training principles, and what I call the 4 Fs, or the 3 Fs if you like, if we recognize that all our training should be able to fall through the, jump through the hoops of those 10 training principles, and these are also fueled or made into something worthwhile by the 5 domains. And so we need to recognize that what we do, how we manage horses and how we train them, is really the the key is to the sustainable future. So what I think we need to do is to have a whole new approach, and education, in my view, is the strongest theme for change. A bottom-up approach really means appealing to the grassroots, and in particular educating people who ride horses. We need the FEI and other federations, including racing, to be at the forefront of change. The way forward is to reward the use of the least aversive equipment in horse training, and this includes penalising for equipment that harms horses. Dr. Jeroen Akkerstrom, the chief FEI vet, has said that horses in sport should not be considered any longer as partners, but instead we should be considering ourselves as guardians of them. Whatever we think of the term guardian, I believe this is a laudable step in the right direction. If we take the view of the Netherlands, for example, it should not be that the horse is forced to adapt to the human's needs. It should be the human who adapts to the horse's needs. I also can't help myself but put in this slide of self-courage, because I really do think it is such an important thing that we have to privilege, and at the moment it's not being privileged. Training an animal is about teaching it to do something where, by its own agency, the animal performs behaviours from various sets of cues. On the other hand, coercive control is a more appropriate term when an animal is trapped, for example, between pressures of rein and spur, and the performance itself is one that is held rather than trained. Lack of self-courage in all sports, including racing, is highlighted in Katie Chumola's study with Finnish trotters, which showed mouth pressures peaking at around 25 kilograms, and this is totally unsustainable. Training is very much about self-courage, and this is something that has more than disappeared in the last few decades. Self-courage is demonstrated when the rein is looped for 2 strides or more or less, to show that the horse is trained to self-maintain learned responses and is not held in a frame. Training for true self-courage is not an impossible task. It just requires an educated level of training, which is what horse sports should be rewarding. In fact, testing for self-courage is an old technique and is known as Überstreichen in German. However, tests for self-courage can be extended to not only give with both reins, but also to give with one rein, or even take the legs away for a certain number of strides. These really tell us that the horse is trained to go on its own without further pressuring from the rider. I've been saying for a long time that these tests need to be done for welfare purposes throughout all dressage tests at all levels and in all gaits and in as many movements as possible. If the horse is not in self-courage, he or she will alter tempo, alter the head and neck position, or deviate offline. So there's a lot there for the judge to recognise. It's really heartening to see that the world's greatest trainers in the dressage world, such as Kira Kirkland and Carl Hester, are also advocating this. Because we know from studies with rein tensiometry that judges have difficulty seeing true self-courage and lightness, these tests would serve an important function for judges. Privileging and cementing self-courage into horse sport codes would greatly assist to diminish welfare issues such as hyperflexion, tight nosebands, ischemic blue tongues, mouth lesions, and would lead to a future where elite training meant best practice welfare. In a future world, technology revealing sensory feedback will likely become an increasing part of equine health and welfare in horse sports, as indeed it does now in human sport. Self-courage must be led by the FEI in order to receive social license. Regulation. Nosebands, spurs, whips, bits, especially curb bits, and even education requirements to own horses are really necessary. We understand the latest research that's come about on social media. It's been really rife on social media about double bridles, talking about the pressures that they impose on the poll and the nose. And people are jumping on this and saying, well, therefore, they're really not that bad. But what is failed to mention there, and is really important, is that the curb bit itself is a lever action bit. the ratio is something like 6 to 1 because it has a long shank. So therefore the horse receives in its mouth something like 6 times the pressure that the rider feels in his hands and fingers. So we really need to question the use of curb bits, and already we see riders who are keen at the highest level. Laura Beckelsheimer, I think in England, is already doing Grand Prix in a snaffle, and many riders want to do it. And the FEI should not be slow in allowing this. In fact, what they should do is privilege it. Also, I want to talk about the future of management and technology. In my view, it's possible to morally legitimize the use of domestic horses in sport, providing we recognize the 4Fs: foraging, friends, freedom, and mental fortitude, and other areas of the 5 domains that are essential for horses. The use of horses by humans should be as stress-free as possible. For me, it is a significant argument that selective breeding over perhaps 1,000 generations has molded the domestic horse into an animal that is reasonably tolerant of things like girth pressures and other stimuli. And from the little we know scientifically about how they feel during a horse-friendly foundation training, they at least learn to possibly enjoy the company and effects of a good trainer. What is really interesting, I find, as someone who has spent many years training young horses, and in fact almost solely foundation training, or what is known as in the old days as breaking in, was something that I did almost solely for 12 years. And I raised my family doing this. And I was always amazed. Most of the horses that I trained in those days were horses for racing. But I was so amazed that many of those did not seem to have any outward signs of problems when the girth was done up. However, others certainly do. And possibly we've bred those more hyperreactive horses back into our populations, because hyperreactive horses not only can win races, especially sprint races, but they also now win dressage tests. And so we really need to reconsider breeding. So we've really got to get our house in order. Amongst all the other things to renovate, there are current management issues in horse keeping that arise from a lack of education, such as obesity and over-rugging. We call it rugging in Australia, blankets, the use of horse blankets. Here in Australia, it's absolutely ridiculous how many rugs people think they need on horses. And again, education is important, because people don't realise that horses warm from the outside in, and from the breakdown of fibre in their gut. That's what keeps them warm, and also their surface area to volume ratio is so much lower. In addition, we're breeding animals to their own demise, because, as with all other domestic species, including dogs, narrow gene pools produce harmful effects because of the loss of natural protective genetic mechanisms. I think it's important to recognise that technology will certainly come into play. I can see very clearly technology coming in to measure what riders do in the future in terms of rein tensiometry. These used to be really clumsy, cumbersome, big pieces of technology, and now they're tiny gadgets that fit easily onto reins. I think that would be important to know. And I'm not so naive to think that we would have the same pressures for all horses and in all movements, but we would get baseline data in our understanding about what constitutes ethical training and self-carriage by the use of such technology. And also, and I've got this picture up here of the pain face, where we have used in the past facial action coding systems, where we look at various aspects of the horse's face. And these are well-validated tests that first began with mice and rats, but have been extended to other animals, even cats and dogs. But the problem with facial action coding is you need trained observers. And so this makes it slightly problematic, because there are different observers' abilities. And the other problem is that it's there is quite a variation in morphology in horses' faces. But if we use machine learning, and that is coming up, and that's why I have the picture of the cat, because I don't have a picture of a horse with all of these points. But machine learning can fire onto an animal's face and body thousands and thousands of points through which we would get baseline data, and we can relate that to all of the other tests we have of stress and positive affective states. So not only bad things and stressful things, but also good things. What constitutes a happier horse once we start to crunch all of these potential data. And this is really very new. In fact, I think it was only last year that for the first time, scientists were able to detect positive effect in dogs' faces through the use of machine learning technology. And so this is just the start. And there are other people, Gabriele Lasoni and many others, looking at the use of machine learning in and affective states. And so AI, I think, will really help spur that on. And I see AI, I know there are so many problems, unknown and unintended consequences that will possibly arise from AI, but I think it will also give us a much better way of assessing animal stress and animal happiness in a much more independent way that is probably more believable by the public. And so my final slide is, and I can't help doing this as I am now patron of Pony Club Australia, and I'm really proud to be so, and my involvement with the syllabus and the important work of Dr. Portland Jones in getting these syllabi together, which is now, I think, celebrating this month its 5th year of release. Pony Club Australia are leading the world in adopting this evidence-based education syllabus that's centred on the 5 domains model: equine cognition, equine learning, optimising training with biomechanical knowledge, welfare science, and veterinary care. My parting comment is that it is really important that we recognise that there is a great opportunity for sustainability in horse riding and horse sports, at least for some time in the future, if we take heed of the horse's needs. As Malgorzata Lubelska-Sasno pointed out, taking the view of the Netherlands, it should not be the horse that is forced to adapt to human needs. It should be the human who adapts to the horse's needs. Education is the way forward, and my firm belief that it all starts with children. If we wait too long to do anything, legislation and regulation may make far bigger changes than we bargained for. So I think it's important to recognise that all of us listening to this webinar can make a difference. We need to recognise that there is evidence-based material out there. We have data already. We know we can do a better job. And even if we look back over the years, there have been many better things in earlier times than what we see now, because what we see now has been the result of the rapid monetisation and commodification of horses in sport. So we really need to look ahead to sustainability to make it a better life for horses. So we can all make a difference. So thank you very much.
Wow, that was great. Lori, I'm going to go to you and see what kind of questions you have in the chat.
Well, I need to encourage people to write questions. I think they're all absorbing the material. It was great. But I do have a question. I am teaching a college course in equine assisted services, and I find that the students are, you're talking about grassroots and how to affect them and give them the evidence-based and try to, reform their thinking. I find there's a lot of resistance still. It's like, we've done it this way, the public doesn't understand. Do you have any tricks or thoughts of how to try to change that at the grassroots?
Well, yes, I mean, I've been in the hornet's nest for so many years now that it's, I don't have any real tricks, but I think persistence and staying the course, when we first introduced the new syllabus in Pony Club Australia, which was a radical shift from what there was, Australia is a federalised country like the USA, so we have states. And so Pony Club really arose in the various states before the Pony Club Australia board came along. And so the states actually have quite a lot of control over what happens. And some of the states were very good. They had more boards that had people on them who were more appropriately qualified, and they embraced the new syllabus really very, very quickly, and others didn't. And there's still some problems with it going out to the whole of Australia, but nonetheless it's a roller coaster that's happening, because people read the syllabus and see this is the story of the horse. And I think that's why I talk about children, because children really love that. They love to learn about horses from the point of view of evolution and why they've evolved to be like they are. And so I just think staying the course is really important. But one of my techniques that I have is that I realize that if you tell people 100 things that they're doing wrong, or even 2, they'll switch off. But if you simply take the problem by asking questions and formulate really good questions about why they see the horse as they do, and you can, with consistent questioning, lead them to their own understanding, where they recognize that there is a lot more to learn about horses, because there's a lot of interesting things about their behavior that we don't understand, but are more easily explained by understanding how horses learn. But I wish I did have some tricks up my sleeve. But I do think that social media, social platforms should really be there to help lead the way. And we have such a diversity in the horse world that I think it's possible that we could recruit so many people from so many different areas. I run a Diploma of Equitation Science, which is a government accredited course here in Australia, but we have students from all over the world. And the design of that course is to enable trainers in any discipline and any sport to understand what is going on and how horses learn the things that they propose to teach them in any sport or discipline. And so I do think, and that is beginning to take hold and make a change. And of course, all the people who graduate are doing their own thing in various countries. And I keep hearing great stories about this. So I think there is a bright future, but any path towards social change is always rocky, and it's never straightforward and going upwards. It goes up and down a bit and up and down a bit, but gradually we will get there.
Hey, I have a question from Katrina. It moved on me. She says, thanks for the great overview. And you mentioned passing about the removal of submission from the collective marks in dressage tests. In Canada, we have not taken this step yet. And can you talk about how this was achieved in Australia?
Well, it's been achieved in the FEI level too. And I think it's a really important step to remove. I don't know if it's removed from Australia yet, but it's definitely from the FEI. I know that because I did a talk in Sweden about submission, and one of the judges was very quick to point out that this has already occurred. I think it's so essential that we do, because that part of the dressage test automatically invites people to understand that if horses are submissive, they'll do what you want. And it reminds me, it's so similar to what happened when I first went to Southeast Asia to train elephants. And there the approach was very much from a point of view of religion, which I didn't want to, dismantle or destroy at all. I wanted to really appreciate the culture. But they would say to me that the god Ganesh gave them the elephant to serve them, and all they need to do is make him submissive enough to do it. Instead of recognizing the truth of it, that the god Ganesh may well have given the elephant, but what they have to do is not make him submissive, but actually teach him. And if we recognize that, instead of looking for submission in horses, if we looked at their willingness to respond in the sense that they give an immediate reaction to the lightest and most invisible of aids. And when we release the reins and check for self-carriage, the horse stays in his speed and all of those sorts of things. I think we would make further steps forward there. But how we do it, I think we just have to approach our various federations and really push them to do that.
Another question, Heather had the opportunity to talk with the Australian Pony Club, and the US Pony Club is very interested in begging horse welfare and social license conversation. Where do we start?
Sorry, what was I didn't quite catch that. Where would we start?
So she's asking that she's talked to Australia's Pony Club, and she says that the Pony Club in the US is interested in working on the welfare and social license conversation, and where do we start as a pony club?
I actually think the USA is becoming interested in that space, according to the chair of Pony Club Australia, and she has been at international meetings. So it is beginning to happen. But I think the more we engage with them and actually try to contact them and meet them in person. I think emails are not always easy; they can be easily dismissed. But meeting people in person is really valuable. And recognising, I think, that other countries are doing it. One of the things that held our syllabus back was the fact that, well, no one else in the world's doing it. And Australians are typically people who, in sport at least, or horse sports definitely, who only look to see what other people do in the world. And we don't do anything until anyone changes, especially Europeans and in particular in Germany, what they do with dressage horses.
Is
It was a big deal to change. It was a big deal to change what we did in Pony Club. But nonetheless, we had a really outstanding board, a skill-based board in Pony Club Australia. And boards for all horse sports should be skill-based. They shouldn't be just now, representative riders or parents. So I think the move towards more skill-based boards, then those people readily see. It didn't take any convincing really for Pony Club Australia, because as soon as I presented the possibility and the idea, certainly at that time our CEO was right onto it.
Heather says that she was one of the 3 that presented in front of the United States Pony Club, so she's on
good.
it.
Excellent. That's
Is
great.
Is that manual from Pony Club available internationally? Can we order it from Pony Club in Australia?
I don't know the answer to that. I know pony clubs can buy it.
Okay, so maybe
The various certificate levels in the syllabus, but that is something that I'm not on the board of Pony Club Australia anymore. I did my time. I did 6 years during which the syllabus was constructed, and we developed a welfare policy too, and that was the last thing
I would recommend we could probably just send them a letter, because I know, or email, because I have gotten stuff from Australia before too, which I think you guys have great information in general. Somebody asked, how can the racehorse industry incorporate this approach? And they want to know if it's a lost cause.
No, absolutely. No, nothing's a lost cause. It's only a lost cause if we believe it to be that way. I'm on the board of the Equine Welfare Advisory Council for Racing Victoria, and I didn't really have a huge interest in racing in these latter years in my life, but it was such a great opportunity to help make change, and we have already developed. We've based our strategic plan and policies on the 5 domains. We have a really marvelous set of cartoon type education models for trainers and for all sorts of personnel. I've actually done workshops for people involved in handling horses at races, and veterinary nurses and vets themselves on safe and more ethical handling of horses at the racetrack. So I think that racing certainly will move ahead. And as I said, the International Federation of Horse Racing Authority, they have already adopted the 5 domains, and I don't want that to be seen as just simply a sort of welfare washing exercise. I do believe that they're genuine in that, and that we just need to follow suit, and again, we need to get in there. My approach has always been to just get in amongst them and start talking to them. And I'm not a person who likes to make battles and pick fights, but I do like healthy discussions, and just have a very healthy discussion, because it's a no-brainer that because we could actually do horse training much better if trainers had a better grasp of learning theory and management, the welfare aspects of, the freedom foraging and friends. If we gave horses their opportunities for social needs and others, and trained them well, horses would go much better, and we would see much less wastage.
Two people, the last questions are two that are asking the same thing. They say the information is so great and so much, and they want to know if it's going to be available, the recording. And the answer is yes, and it will be up in a week or less on the HHRF website. So you get
YouTube, our YouTube channel.
or the YouTube channel. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So yes, you can go watch it again, which I am certainly going to do.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I must admit there is certainly more I could cover, and I did prune a little bit to be within the time frame, because I used to be notorious for going over time, so I'm a slow learner. It took me a while to learn my lesson, but I managed to fit it in this time. But there is so much, there's more to this, but I hope I've tweaked the imagination of people, and to make people feel that it isn't a lost cause, that there is a way forward, but nonetheless the eyes of the world are on us.
Sure.
You may have to come back for another webinar to fill us in on some more.
Yes, thank you very much. I would be happy to do that.
Well, we definitely appreciate your time and effort for this webinar, and I hope you have a good day. And we're wrapping it up at night here in the United States.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody.